Great to have your company tonight. It is time to have a debate and a conversation and a discussion about the future of our city. There are so many issues to discuss. So joining me in the studio tonight is National's Korako and Labour's Ruth Dyson. And good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Good to have you in the studio. Let's get straight to this. There's too much to discuss. There are too many issues going on in Christchurch. Number one is the controversial convention centre. Nook, let me start with you. Is it really a good thing for the city?
Oh, absolutely. Particularly with all the incremental value that a convention centre can bring to a city. So, you know, with a lot of people, hundreds, thousands of people, and then all of those sort of different businesses that will benefit from that. So, and that is a real part of the whole infrastructure of a city, is to try and attract people, you know, tourists, business tourists actually to the city, and be able to have their conference, but also to be able to capitalise on everything that the city has to offer.
Why then the delays? Because that is incredibly frustrating for the business and the tourism community that is calling out for these buildings to bring them the hope they so desire.
Yeah, I think particularly with the anchor projects, I mean, what's the total cost of the anchor projects all up? It's around 4.8 billion. And so when we look at these anchor projects, so the convention centre, the Metro Sports Centre and that, these are intergenerational assets. And so what we need to do is that we need to get you know, everything lined up right before we actually start building them. And so what happens is that with these anchor projects, we've got to sort of try and maximise the quality of them, the longevity, the lifetime of them. And then also the other part is that we need to be able to, you know, to look at the fact that, okay, we did it right, we took our time, just a few more months, you know, I think is important, particularly, as I said, they're intergenerational. And the other part of it is that, you know, there's a lot of sort of commercial considerations with these anchor projects. And you know, that actually entails commercial negotiations. So you know, whenever there's sort of high costs like this, I mean, there's always rumours. I don't think that we should get into the sort of the rumours, you know, around the costs and all that. I think because that would sort of be detrimental to the negotiations that are continuing to go on.
Well, I don't think there's rumours about the costs. The Prime Minister actually at the tourism conference said the budget for the Christchurch Convention Centre has blown out and it's a problem. Jerry Brownlee said the next day, actually there's no problem at all with the budget. I think that having the Prime Minister and the Minister arguing publicly about the budget for the Convention Centre is a very bad look for our city. I don't think they should do that in public. They're entitled to do it in a cabinet committee or behind closed doors. But I think for the confidence of our city, we should be showing a united front and get our facts on the table. So that was the first worrying thing. Recently there's been a cabinet paper released that makes it clear that the commitment from government to the convention centre is not 100%. It actually says we need a lot more money to get this project back on track, get it going, and then Cabinet will make the decision about whether to proceed with it or not.
Yeah, see, that's an interesting point, Nick, because this is a government-led project, right? So you have government officials that decide on the creation of this convention centre. Now, based on their own proposal and their own wisdom, they're having to reconsider the scope, the size and the cost. Are they morons? No way. I mean, I think with what you know, Ruth is saying, I mean, I haven't even heard some of this information that she's giving out at the moment, but okay, when you look at the partnership here, particularly with these anchor projects, it's not only just the Crown. I mean, Christchurch City Council is involved as well. There's also but here's the deal. What I point to is you look down Durham Street, for example, there is some amazing private investment going down there. Their buildings are up. They're not saying we want to get it right, we've only got one chance. They've gone ahead and they've bloody well done it, and they look fabulous. And you know, you've got government officials saying, well, you know, that's private money, it's different. Well, so too is public money as well. But Christchurch is saying, let's just get on with it. And if you have to reduce the size of the convention centre because the cash is not originally there, and there's been cost blowouts, and I accept that can happen in commercial worlds, then why not reduce the size and get on with it? That's what some in council are saying.
I think, Chris, it's more about scale. I mean, what you just quoted with those sort of private businesses, private investors that have just gone ahead with it, that's fine. But when we look at the, total cost, individual costs of these anchor projects, I mean, that's why it's taking a lot more time. But as I come back to my first point, is that we need to get this right. These are intergenerational, and if we don't get them right at the beginning, well, then we're definitely going to run into problems further on down.
I agree. We only do get one shot of that. Is that a fair point, Ruth Dyson? It is a lot of public money at stake here. We only get one chance to get a public building that will be intergenerational right. So is the government being cautious about this then?
How much is the taxpayer putting in? How much is Christchurch City Council expected to front up to the convention centre? And how much is going to be private investment? Even that isn't clear from the business case. So the anchor projects were announced as part of the blueprint. Great hoo-ha, 100 days and we've got this blueprint. And basically what we've had since then is a very, very expensive playground, $26 million for the Margaret Mahy playground, and the bus exchange. We haven't seen a lot else since then. So that 100-day announcement gave everyone a bit of a lift, it gave some confidence, there was a bit of debate about.
Are you being unreasonable though, because the Justice Precinct is coming along, it's looking beautiful, we've got the Avon River Precinct eventually. Is it more a case of slow and steady wins the race though?
I don't mind that, but I don't think that's where the convention centre is at. I think there is a huge amount of debate within Cabinet about whether we want to spend any money on the convention centre in Christchurch. It may be linked to the Sky City Convention. With a country as small as New Zealand, how many convention centres can operate successfully? There's only so many international events that we can host. It might be linked in with that. But I think the Prime Minister and Jerry Brownlee need to get their heads together, get one line, get it agreed, and tell us what's happening.
I mean, it's a fair comment, Nook. Is there a bit of argy-bargy now going on? Because it does seem to me it looked pretty bad when you got the Earthquake Recovery Minister, Jerry Brownlee, saying one thing, and then you got the Prime Minister, by all accounts, giving a slightly more perhaps honest approach to this. He admitted that a cost blowout. He did so again on my show on News Talk ZB last week.
Yeah, not at all. What I think, it's the opposition, Ruth, or however you want to say it, is that the glass is always half empty on this one. I mean, to us, the glass is half full. But the glass is half full. I mean, obviously, there is.
That's a fair comment, though. Who's right and who's wrong? Yeah. Is the Prime Minister or is it Jerry Brownlee?
The Prime Minister said budget blowout. Jerry Brownlee said no budget blowout. One of them's wrong.
I think it's I think you better talk to them then. I mean, the fact is though,
give them a call.
is that give them a call. I think the fact is that this is not consistent though. I mean, there is possible times when there's sort of different messaging. I mean, for God's sake, when you look at the Christchurch rebuild, I mean, it is the largest undertaking of any economical development in the history of New Zealand.
Yeah, I've heard this before.
But all of that, I'm just putting it in sort of perspective.
Once again, I come back to the argument or the comparisons of private investment, private development. They're not still saying all the things that we're hearing about the delays, though. They've gone ahead and done it.
Yeah, it's interesting, when you talk about...
And you've got John Key who turns up to nearly every private investment building, trumpeting it as if it's some major milestone for the government.
Yeah, and he turns up at not only them, he turns up at a lot of others as well.
Sure, of course.
I mean, I think the situation is that when we look at this rebuild, I mean, as I said, it's going to take time, and there is going to be some probably mismessaging sometimes. But at the end of the day, let's just look at what we've achieved to date. It was really interesting reading the press a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday when Roger Sutton actually was overseas, still is, and he visited L'Aquila. In Italy, and they had an earthquake in 2009. They're nowhere near where we are actually in progress, nowhere near it whatsoever.
And they don't have
and then
land
they've got over 50, they've got 60 million people. They've got 60 million people there, they're part of the common market. And then, we're looked on as an exemplar as to a small country of over 4 million people, and then we're getting on with rebuilding our city.
Well, I want to talk to you
largest city in New Zealand.
Well, I want to talk to you later on, guys, about the population of our city and whether there could be an oversupply of some of the so-called convention centres that are planned for Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Queenstown. That is next. Stay with us. You're watching Lynched on CTV. Plenty to discuss on CTV's Lynch programme tonight. Let's get to issue number 2, the Metro Sports Centre. More delays there. Once again, look, I'm not blaming you, but we're facing all these delays and they seem unnecessary. We're looking at, what, 2020 now? Christchurch needs these with some urgency, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So what are you putting the delays down to now?
I just come back to what I said about the convention centre. I mean, again, another sort of intergenerational asset. We've got to get it right, you know, and so that's why it's taking a bit more time.
5 years is quite a long time to get an intergenerational asset detail, right? I mean, we are really short of facilities.
I don't think it's just about the detail. I think, you know, as I said, we've got to get, I mean, there's a lot of planning that goes into this. I mean, there's a lot of negotiations with other landowners, with neighbours, all that sort of thing. I mean, you know, it's taken some time. More time than was originally said,
I thought the brewery site was cleared and ready to go.
Mm.
That's where the sports facility goes. The brewery's gone. It's a big car park space now. I don't think there's any issue with landowners. That was compulsorily acquired and the buildings on it have gone, so that can't be right.
Tell you the issue I have, and I might be wrong, and tell me to shut up if I am wrong. I can't help but wonder whether there's a culture inside government agencies, and I'm not blaming National and I'm not blaming Labour, but I can't help but wonder whether there's a culture inside some of these big government-led agencies of delay tactics, because they stand to gain with invested interest by keeping their jobs. And it seems to me that the bigger the government department, the more delays you have. In any government department, in fact, in any state-run organisation in this country, there seems to be an unnecessary amount of bloated bureaucracy that goes with that. Am I wrong?
I don't think it's a deliberate delay by the CERA officials. I don't think that would be true. But I do think that the original intention, which was to have CERA as a small, nimble agency which led our recovery, went out the window pretty fast. It's a huge organisation. So many of the staff come from Wellington every week. They don't have the understanding or commitment to Canterbury that I think the recovery agency needs. It's got like 300 staff, a lot of them leaving, admittedly, but still a huge organisation. And developers say that they get on and do things despite CERA, not because of it.
And that's a well-rounded comment, isn't it, that we do hear time and time again, that the development of our city is moving forward in spite of CERA. And the evidence is all too clear when you go into central Christchurch, Durham Street.
Oh, I think, first of all, that the New Zealand taxpayer stumped up with $16.5 billion to date. And so it's just not, you know, that's just not a drop in the ocean. Sure, there is, you know, a lot of administration, a lot of layers, but, you know, that to me is where you get transparency. That's to me where you actually get something that is correct. That's all really important, because at the end of the day, again, I come back to the fact.
Are we getting transparency though? I for example, put in a few requests to CERA public relations personnel wanting to know details on the trip they went to Sri Lanka and India on. We had, you know, 2 spin doctors going to there. All I was told was, don't worry, Chris, we got great value for money. We've now got interest, apparently, from Indian and Sri Lankan officials that want to invest in Christchurch. I say, who are they? Let's see the results. Oh, we can't tell you that for commercial sensitivity. What rubbish?
Well, I think commercial consideration, there could be commercial negotiations going on. I mean, it is sensitive stuff.
Oh, I agree, but I do wonder though, we have Anthony Goff, who was on the show a while ago, saying, oh, what rubbish. What is the incentive for somebody from overseas to invest in Christchurch? At the moment, there's next to nil. Yes, you've got Vodafone, yes, you've got Kathmandu. Congratulations to those 2 companies. They were already coming here regardless, weren't they?
Well, Kathmandu was already here.
Yeah.
Vodafone put their head office here, didn't they?
Which is great.
That was really good.
But isn't it funny?
3 ministers at the opening of a private investors building.
Well, yeah, that's true. But, you know, isn't it funny, though, we live in extraordinary times where I get excited about hearing that the Vodafone headquarters is going to be in Christchurch. You know,
it is good, though.
But you know what I mean? Who would have thought we'd get excited about seeing a building going up? But we do.
Yeah.
I want to come back to CERA, though.
That's probably my point around, you know, the fact that these things do take time. I mean, there's a lot of companies, you know, that look at it, they look at the process and, you know, they're confident that things are being managed properly, so that gives them the incentive, I think. One of the incentives.
One final question before we take a break. I want to talk about Sarah. Is it time to get rid of this organisation now? I mean, they've had a very, very good innings, as my mother would say to me. Is it time that this organisation went? I mean, we've now got the Christchurch City Council that has created this development authority. I would have thought that was Sarah's job, CCDU's job. Is it time to say, thanks guys, the houses have come down now, get on your bike and head back to Wellington?
We said going into the 2014 election campaign as part of Labour's commitment that we needed a transition plan so that Sarah didn't just disappear, that the special powers and the legislation didn't just finish and everyone's going, now what do we do? Jerry Brownlee said that was ludicrous and ridiculous, and immediately after the election set up a transition board to develop the transition plan. And I agree with him. That's what we need. I think that the people on the transition board are good, competent, passionate people. It's led by Dame Jenny Shipley. She knows this stuff. She knows government departments and agencies. She's pretty fearless.
And she says she's very keen on record to make this transition as fast as possible.
Despite her drive and her personality, the transition plan has been delayed by a further 2 months. Nobody knows why. There's no public indication of it was due out in May, and now it's perhaps July.
But 2 months isn't that big a deal, really, is it, in the scheme of things?
2 months when the legislation finishes next year, and there's nothing in place to transition the powers of Sarah, let alone the things they do outside their legislative powers, like the Development Agency CCDU debate. That should be sorted. They said it was going to be out in May. Now it might be out in July.
Look, what are you hearing from around the traps? Do you believe that Sarah will eventually go? Do you believe the CCDU is still warranted? Do you believe the council has the skill within the organisation now to take on the functions that Sarah perhaps once had?
Answer to your question around do I believe that ultimately Sarah need to be transitioned? Absolutely. But let's just come back to the history behind this. I mean, and this is one of the things that overseas, they've looked at really closely, and that's been the fact is that after this tragic earthquake, we set up under an Act of Parliament the CR Act, and so within that, we were able to then form a platform to continue on with the recovery and the rebuild. That's the first thing. The next one is that there was always, I believe that there was always a plan to actually transition Sarah, and what's happened is that plan still hasn't been completed because they were waiting for the advisory group to come back with their findings. They've done that, they've had the first report back, this is the advisory group, and then now they will continue on using that advisory group's information to develop the plan, to continue to develop that plan. I think the important thing, though, is that the question is that so when Sarah does transition, what functions of Sarah can easily be put into the Christchurch City Council?
And that's a very good point. I want to pick you guys up on that next, because we've got plenty to discuss. When we return, we will discuss what's happening inside the Christchurch City Council. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Lynched on CTV. My guest tonight is National's Korako and Labour's Ruth Dyson. All right, let's talk about the council, shall we? Incredible news last week, I thought, when Leanne Dalzell announced on my show that Dr. Carleen Edwards, the Chief Executive of the Christchurch City Council, was making a big effort to save the council cash. And I thought, oh, here we go, whatever. But indeed, she was doing just that, 7 plus 7 plus 7%, 3 years, saving the operational expenditure by $40 million. Now, that's a hard task. This will include job cuts, no doubt, and I don't take great delight in doing that, but what I do have delightful thoughts are of the fact that that shows that finally that the Titanic is steering, and perhaps there's some hope here, Ruth Dyson.
I totally agree. I think it's really good. I think it's been good work by Carleen Edwards. She didn't rush into it. She didn't arrive and do what a lot of incoming new chief executives do and sort of make their mark by doing a restructure.
Yeah, they do used to all the time at TVNZ.
I know, it's very frustrating. So she's taken the time to look at what was learnt from the Doug Martin work on the building consents and said, right,
$2,000 a day, man, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. big investment. But she's looked around the place properly, and now she said we can do this better. I think that the levels that they've got there, the tiers of management, are quite cumbersome and slow a lot of stuff down. I think you've got some really competent people, but I do agree with you. It's pretty awful welcoming the idea that people are going to lose their jobs. But if this can make the City Council operate within a more sensible budget, but also deliver better outcomes, then I wish her every success. It'll be a hard job, and I'm really sad that some people will lose their jobs. How could you not be?
Yeah, it's awful. It is awful to think that.
But in the end, we have to tighten our belts a bit, and we have to make that council work better.
It's a bit of a paradox though, isn't it, Nook? Because on one hand you would think that if you cut jobs and you downsize the size of the council, it will run smoother. But then the other school of thought, and the PSA have come out and said this, with Christchurch's population expected to increase over the coming years, you actually need more staff. I mean, they would say that, but what do you say?
Well, first of all, I absolutely agree that Carleen Edwards, the job that she's done to date has been exemplary. Really has, because I've seen Carleen at sort of various functions and that, and just talking to her, and absolutely right. Right at the beginning, she said that you know, she was going to have a good look inside of this organisation, and then and particularly talk to all of the staff, all of those, doesn't matter whether they're permanent, casual, part-time, or whatever. And that's what she's actually done. But she's actually gone out beyond that and talk to a lot of other different organisations in Christchurch as well. Absolutely, there is that situation where there's an unfortunate thing coming that people are going to lose their jobs. I think the important thing is that what she has said is that, you know, and what she was put there for is to do exactly what you described right at the beginning. You know, we have to actually run this machine a lot better than what it has been run. So she's in there and she's starting to message out that one of the major reasons she's there was to trim the sails and to work smarter and to make this machine actually work a lot harder for using less fuel.
And do you think if you do use less fuel, you are bound to be more efficient, and therefore that is actually going to be better for the ratepayers? I noticed there was some commentary last week suggesting it could be a bad thing because we'll lose services. But is that potentially just scaremongering from possibly those who may face the chopping board, Ruth Dyson?
Well, I certainly don't think there should be wholesale reduction in staff without any, you know, assessment of what are the consequences going to be. We get really good service from our council. Despite the complaints that many people have, if you compare Christchurch City Council with councils not just in New Zealand but internationally, we get really good service, but we can do it better. I think Carleen's expression was future-proof, the role of the council, and I think that's a good way of looking at it.
They're
What's
good
the
words.
best way
I like
to
those
go
words.
in the future?
Future-proof.
Well, I think that's how she actually thinks.
Well, it's better than those awful words, game changer. I get sick of that.
Yeah.
But future-proof, I like. Look, we're almost out of time, guys, but I do appreciate you both coming on the program tonight. I like to end on something positive so I don't go home and get on the bottle. Nook, what do you see 2015 bringing? Bearing in mind, sorry, we're nearly halfway through the year, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
That's scary. But let's look at the second half of the year in Christchurch. Give us something hopeful.
A more vibrant city and a council that's actually working to what was promised actually when Carleen came in.
I see promise, actually. I see hope, Ruth Dyson.
Absolutely, there's always hope. I want to see resolution of the red zone offer for the people who haven't yet had an offer. It's the middle of 2015. They've been red zoned for a long time. They've won every legal battle possible and the Minister still hasn't made them an offer. I really want that to end for them. It's not fair. If we'd spent the money that was spent on the Margaret Mahi playground on making the red zone offer fair, i.e. 100%, we would have still had money left over.
That's a fair comment. Although you and I might be able to go down the slide, it might be a gold-plated slide, who knows?
Well, we might be the only ones there.
Who knows? And look, it does look pretty flash.
Yeah.
Or should be for that amount of money.
Absolutely.
Korako, thanks so much for coming on the program. Lovely to meet you, and thank you for your time, Ruth Dyson. Always nice to see you.
Thank you for having
and
me
that
on
is
the
our show for CTV for tonight. Do join me on News Talks. It'll be tomorrow. Christchurch, Merely and Dalzell fronts up for the weekly catch-up. But from me and all the CTV team, you have a good night.